Thank you for tuning in to Narrow Minded. And we don't talk about book club. You got your host, Sean Slimak.
My name is Casey James.
And we're here to talk about Cormac McCarthy, most notably his two final novels, The Passenger and Stella Maris, and also just his legacy.
And the fucked up shit that he wrote about.
Yeah, that's the best part. Spoiler alert, because we're talking about all of it, so if you haven't read or seen any of it, just be aware that we're talking all spoilers.
Yeah, I think this is mostly for people who have read Cormac McCarthy and want to talk about it with somebody, just like us.
Yep, that's why we're here.
The Passenger. Well, okay, it has been 6 months, but I think having had 6 months to like sit and think about it, it'll be an interesting. Like, this is my take, having gestated for a long period of time, and then you've just finished it. So, what my big takeaways? I'll start with The Passenger. Is like the way that he just effortlessly can craft dread into everything that happens throughout that book. It's just like, it almost feels like a fever dream.
Yeah.
Like, when I really think about the entirety of it from beginning to end, it's just this big, long contemplation, where like he just barely doesn't have any action, but he does. He has just enough action and takes you along to just enough places. Like, I think he was just almost like seeing like how little content can he give you as far as like actual events, and then how much room can he give himself to just meditate on like the most universal biblical questions, and make that the book. I think that's what was so interesting about it, because like, it's only McCarthy could do it, and only McCarthy, like, stage in his career could he have done that. Like, you had to have known this is a McCarthy. It's been a long time. This is probably his last book. So, it reminds me of like Old Man Carlin, like those last couple specials of George Carlin, where you're like, yeah, it's not funny anymore, but like, he's really smart. So, like, and that's what it is. It just, once you get over like the weird intrusion of the hallucinations, and like jumping between the brother and sister. What's the sister's name?
Alice.
Yeah, Alice. Like, that took me a second to get used to. Because at times it was hard for me to get into the Alice parts at first, because you don't really recognize a reason at first, and that they're hallucinations, so that this is a conversation she's having with herself. So therefore, like, as the reader, I kind of wanted to be like, what am I getting out of this? And that's kind of, it's weird, because there's a lot of reasons I would say that it was a bad book because of that, but it's not a bad book because it's just like so fucking smart that McCarthy just has a good job of making you think he knows something that you don't. And I think that was like his grand finale of that kind of gesture of just like the cosmos in just a few sentences, and like, regrets and what that does, because if you break it down, like what The Passenger is really about. I mean, I guess I want to leave that to a more open thing, and ask you, because like, I can't fully tell you what it's about. Like, I can address the themes about it, but if I had to break it down to like one sentence, like when we were like texting about this, you can't stop what's coming.
Yeah.
You can't, no matter how smart you are, no matter how planned or how, it doesn't matter. And I think that's always been his thesis, in his whole body of work. It's just like, the universe is this really cruel, beautiful place, and it will run you over. It's
Hmm.
going to run you over, and this is what it looks like. You know?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. And Stella, um, I mean, I don't think Stella is really a standalone novel per se. Like, you really need it to kind of be married along with The Passenger.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, really, really wonderful dialogue. Enough to sustain the entirety. Like, once you realize that this is all it's gonna be, it's like, oh, okay, shit.
Yeah.
But just the way that she plays with him, and like, I wasn't a fan of him being sexually attracted to her. I thought that was, I don't
Yeah.
know, just there's like obviously, yeah. I'm curious to see what you think the representations of the incest uh, themes are, because as with most McCarthy books, there's always a couple really upsetting parts about the plot
Yeah.
or character or just names of characters. Like, Jesus Christ, I just started rereading Sutri. I don't know if you ever read Sutri.
No,
Uh,
but I heard that that's a wild story. I heard that there's a lot.
there's a lot, and like right off the bat, I forgot there's a character whose name is literally just the N word. So,
What
you know,
the hell? Oh my
just
god.
having back and forths with N word
Oh.
this and N word that, and just like, ah. So yeah. Okay, what are your thoughts?
First, I'll touch on the incest stuff because you brought that up. So when I was going through the passenger and just the reference there about how they're in love, I felt icky about it. But after Stella Maris, I was like, I don't feel as icky about it because the way that she kind of painted it, I was like, in a sad way. It's like I get it, like,
She
and
really
you,
loved it.
yeah, and you hear that they didn't actually fully act on it, which was like a relief as a reader. I was like, oh, okay. they
Yeah,
they didn't fuck. Okay, cool. Um,
yeah,
but
just yeah. Ah,
um,
what a relief.
I know, right? And then I guess I'll start from the passenger. So I liked how the passenger just in its entirety was just like this odyssey of Bobby Western just navigating through his salvage diver stuff, his friends, New Orleans, going to his grandma's, but there was always that like haunting looming threat of like the people in suits who were trying to investigate him and all that stuff. And like there was this scene that was like, it felt like a horror novel in some parts, like when he's on the oil rig and he
Oil rig
thinks he
is my
sees
favorite part.
someone, or he says it, he's like, and there's someone sitting there, and then it just ends that chapter or whatever.
Yeah,
um
the coffee mug.
yeah, yes, yes. um and it was just like there were, I love that, and that's something that he kind of does with his other books too, is he just has like these haunting, just sometimes like he usually does it with brutality, those haunting things, right? But this one, it was just like, it would always throw me off guard because I'm not expecting it. I'm like, oh, it's just some guy kind of, in some stupor for the last years of his life or whatever. But then it's just like, oh wow, so there's this paranoia that Bobby Western's dealing with. Um, and I really loved how, and I talked to you about this too, how it parallels Robert Oppenheimer's life and his family. You know,
Yeah,
Oppenheimer had two kids. Um, Bobby and Alice's dad was part of making the bomb in the Manhattan Project. He had two kids. Um, I believe it was Oppenheimer's daughter who committed suicide. And as you know, in The Passenger, um, and it's alluded to in Stella Maris, but same thing happens with Alice. Um,
yeah.
and I think that it was, that's something else that threw me off too. I was just like, I'm excited for the Oppenheimer movie, right, by Christopher Nolan coming out. I'm reading this
Hmm.
book, and I'm like, oh shit, there's like a whole bunch of things relaying back to that,
Yeah,
um, and just kind of like how it also parallels the communist investigations on Oppenheimer and how that cascaded to his kids, and just the paranoia and just the anxiety it probably riddled them with, and how that kind of that's explored a little bit in the Passenger, with how Bobby's just like having to uproot his life and go here or there because he's like, there are people after me, and they're like, why? He's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Which that I love the character of Bobby because of that. Like, all right, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just very and I guess that goes into something else I was talking about with McCarthy, is that like he has a very simplistic way of doing his dialogue. It's just short, efficient, but it feels more real than most people who write dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I think that's the most notable thing about McCarthy is natural dialogue. It's effortless how
yeah,
he does it.
absolutely. And then to piggyback off that, Stella Maris, which I I loved it and I prefer it over, if I had to. They're one thing, right? But if I had to choose either one of them, I would say Stella Maris was my favorite because, and I've said this a million times before, Sunset Limited is one of my favorite movies, and Stella Maris is essentially just a stage play, one location, people talking to each other. But through
Yeah.
that, you explore philosophy, you explore physics and mathematics, which I loved Alice's whole perspective on mathematics and just kind of how it reflects how she just perceives the world itself, right? And I think it adds to, you know, her kind of not wanting to be there. I'd have to think of a specific line that makes that parallel, but the mathematics, I think that was really awesome the way that he tied that in there with her character. Um, and the therapist being so, yeah, you could tell he was attracted to her. They made mention that he was also attractive, but I do not think that there would have been anything to transpire between the two.
Yeah.
And I think it was more so that Alice was really looking at this therapist as like a, almost like, she looked at him like it was intimate between them by their conversation. That's why as it goes on, she's kind of opening up more and they're just talking about these things. And he's really listening, right? He lets her say most of the stuff. And then at the end, when it does reference contact, it's when she's essentially saying like, you know, I'm waiting for something to end. Which, what a haunting last fucking line of that novel, because you know what happens to her, right?
Right.
But I mean, to go back to what you were saying, that was my perspective between their relationship, was that they were attracted to each other, but it was more of an intellectual thing. And then by the time that it actually got to the physical element of it, it was like, you know, it's her essentially coming to terms with what we as the readers know is going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, what I like about watching their relationship is, it goes from this doctor patient relationship to very quickly him realizing like she is incredibly smart, much, much smarter than he is. And he's actually in a circumstance to gain something, from these conversations. Like he's not going to fix anything with her. It's just, he's just going to sit there and bear witness to her.
Yeah.
Like she is this, you know, nuclear force that is going to do what she's going to do because it's like she knows everything. It's what it feels like, and therefore she's going to kill herself. It's like he completely understands that she does in fact probably know everything somehow, and b she has to kill herself, and there's nothing he can do to stop her.
Yeah. And
I think,
just the fact that like she she says something about when you don't know mathematics, it's like magic to you, right? And then you know it and it's not magic, but then you find the answers that you can't solve and it's magical again. I think a part of her sadness is the fact that there's none of that magic anymore for her. She just
yeah.
understands the root of everything at such a level where she's like, there's nothing else from that is really out there for me to know or learn, right? And it just
But
kind of,
because I love that idea, but then I feel like McCarthy fucks with us because then he also kind of just lays out this other question of, is it really just because she can't be with Bobby?
Yeah. Honestly, that probably plays a bigger part with what I was saying, because she really was like her only potential emotional attachment, or not potential, they were actually, emotionally attached, but he was it. And she said how that was the only guy she even wanted to be with. There was literally nothing outside of that.
Right.
And Bobby was tormented because he loved her too, but he had restraint. He's the one who backed off on it because he knew that, in a societal perspective, it was wrong. But as you see at the end of The Passenger, he, I think he thinks of her as something, and he says something to the effect of, he loves her.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he goes the rest of his days without ever falling in love with anyone else, right? Like
Yep.
there's no one else. I think that's like the heaviest part about it. It's just like it's true love and it's also incest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which it's like McCarthy wants to paint this picture of the world and show you like the entire spectrum. Like he's just gonna pick something along the way of like what's the most beautiful thing and what's the most horrific thing, and I'm going to state them both as the same fact.
Yeah.
Just, because every landscape that he's ever described, it'll be like the cascading hills and the bubbling frothy rivers, yellow with condoms floating,
Yeah.
and it's just like, oh, and it's like, look at the fishing boats. Like, this is literally from Sochi that I just read today. Like, these rows of fishing boats out, and everyone's, catching stuff, and someone's pulling a dead body out, and like,
Yeah.
he's got lemon yellow socks on, and his face is like this. It's like, and you see the dead body so vividly, as well as like these sparkling harps as they get pulled from the water, and the water pulling off of them, and then like, someone with the name N-word, and you're like, what the fuck am I reading?
It's like, McCarthy, just be normal sometimes, man. Like,
and then I know what he would say, be like, but this is normal,
right?
Because it's normal to feel fucked up all the time.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I guess so, man. I mean, what I liked about Bobby Western is like, I think he was his first that I've read, his first protagonist that like had a sense of humor.
Yeah. Did the kid have a sense of humor in Blood Meridian?
Not really.
Yeah, he was kind of brooding. He was more so like,
he was just like, no,
yeah,
I ain't gonna do that,
Mm-hmm.
Which was funny. Like he was a funny character,
but he wasn't trying to be. He was just like this hard-headed not little kid, but this hard-headed kid. Yeah.
I think Bobby is like probably also his first like really smart character. I mean, like he has smart characters, like men who like know what they're doing, like with their hands and shit.
Right.
But Bobby Western's the first one who's like
a physicist.
He just like knows things.
Yeah. What was the name of Josh Brolin's character in No Country for Old Men?
Oh, Llewellyn.
Did he in the novel? Did he have any one-liners or anything like that?
No, I never read No Country.
Okay, I need. Yeah. I'm probably gonna do that. I love the movie. It's one of my favorite movies. But I don't know if it's a cinema thing where they kind of have him say some funny stuff sometimes. He'll throw in like a little one-liner.
Like, where'd you get that? The Getting Place.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I'm probably gonna do sometime soon. Is once I finish The Deluge, just gonna be a while. So
it's definitely a big force of a book.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much about The Passenger that like, I felt so teased by him. Like he withheld so much because like, didn't you wish you could be like on a couple salvage diving missions with Western and the
Yeah.
other guys? Like, and the whole thing with like the whole red herring of the crashed plane and the passenger, like
Yeah.
the like the audacity that he called the book The Passenger, and like it's in the synopsis on the back, like a passenger has gone missing from the manifest of this crashed plane that salvage diver Bobby Western was hired to. It sounds like this
Right.
perfect cool setup. Like, all right, we're gonna track this person down. Gonna be some mystery. Gonna solve some weird. No, nope.
Yeah.
Like, we never see the passenger. We never see the people chasing after Bobby, other than like those you know uh, suit and tie guys, and it's like all of it is such lasting uh, imagery, but like, god damn it, like.
Yeah.
uh,
What you were saying earlier about McCarthy's perspective that like we have no control over anything or whatever, life is fucked up, whatever, we're going through it, we have no control over those motions. That essentially makes us a passenger of our own life, right? Don't you think
yeah,
that that's probably what the goal was with the name of the, just each of them, Alice, Bobby, every single character, they're usually in some sort of scenario or situation where they can't do anything about it.
right,
Like
yeah.
grandma is stuck taking care of Royal is
Alice,
stuck being whatever is going on with Royal, like,
yeah, him in the TV.
yeah,
uh, Alice is in the mental institution.
you know.
Yeah, no, I think that's an astute observation, that in the end Bobby is the passenger.
That sounds so corny to say it like that, but I
But
mean
I
it's
mean,
true, yeah.
I think so, right?
Bobby's the
uh
passenger, roll credits, just there it is.
that's it. That's, we just see him in the rolling. Where was it? Like Spain? Where did he end up?
Ibiza, is that where Ibiza is?
I don't know. I'm stupid. Um,
So am I. But the funny thing about that location is that's where Cormac McCarthy was living, like in the 70s or whatever. He was living in Ibiza or whatever. And I think that's around the time when he started thinking of ideas for this novel, The Passenger.
it is Spain. I looked it
It
up.
is Spain. Good call. So you're not. I'm the dumb one. You're not. You
Okay,
good.
I just, I was just like, but if you told me like Brazil or Puerto Rico, I'd be like, oh fuck. Um,
But yeah,
yeah, I so much to take in, because your bit about Oppenheimer, that's coming from not knowing that and then knowing that, it definitely adds an extra layer to understanding the book.
yeah,
You know, like I thought, because in Stella she talks so much about Oppenheimer that
right,
I thought it was just there to give it more life of, here are other um, doomed intellectuals, and this whole idea of like, you can be too smart and unravel the world in your head and then just go fucking crazy. But the fact that their story is basically Oppenheimer's children's story, like, that's, I don't know. I kind of wish I didn't know that.
well, okay, so it's not like the parallel with the kid is like they both had two kids, and the fact that one of them kills themselves, that is
Yeah,
like the extent of it. And also, I mean, the investigating, but that was a small part of The Passenger, right? um
yeah,
I'm sure if we were to actually look at Oppenheimer's kids, it would be like, oh, they were never in love, it's just
yeah,
it wouldn't fully connect. But
yeah, yeah. Do you think? I mean, like, these are like stupid questions, but like, the people that like had his car impounded and like all of his assets frozen, like, were those really just the people that the passenger of the plane and all that was involved with? Or like, because like, that's what I mean, where it started to feel like a fever dream.
yeah,
we're like, he can't be watched that closely because he was the salvage diver, and like, did the other guy that he worked with who died on a, like, could that have
Yeah.
been an accident?
And see, like, I'm sure it's common for salvage divers, especially back then, to die from accidents. But in the
Mhm.
context of these people that he feels are following him, it's like, well, shit, is this connected to that? Or is this just like a coincidence,
Yeah.
And I think that the people impounding all this stuff and all that, I think that was probably literally just the IRS being the IRS. Like, they finally
Right.
got around to it.
Right.
But it makes you think, like, I want to know, I would love if he just had a secret third book where it was just about the passenger, and it's just this crazy, even more of a fever dream of a story that we have more questions at the end of it.
Yeah. I
um
mean, I'm just happy it was like intelligible and like it was a book, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Because when writers get that old and they put out their last stuff, like sometimes it's just kind of like, I
right,
don't know, like I know JD Salinger, by the end of his life was just, I mean, by the end of his writing career, he was just, it was nonsense. It was, you couldn't understand it,
right.
you know. With McCarthy, I started to feel that way a little bit. Like I said, I had to listen to the audiobook twice. Like I had to just go back. As soon as
Yeah,
I finished, I was just like, what? And then like start over. Um, and then I started to realize, like, I think this is like his, I don't know. I definitely felt like it was a swan song. Like it was definitely a man looking back at life, and this is like his last comments on it.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
Your comparison to George Carlin, I think, was perfect, because it really does kind of reflect the end of George Carlin's life, in the sense of how you know things were different, and in hindsight looking at it, it's like, okay, yeah, these were essentially their last words, their swan song before they were shuffled off the mortal coil, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, and like, I don't know, Old Man Carlin. I remember I used to think he was really badass, and then like I watched that documentary on HBO. I don't know if you saw it.
I haven't.
It's pretty good. They like break it down pretty concisely, but yeah, sometimes like when someone's had a voice for so long, and they go through all these different changes and different eras, like it always feels like eventually they get to this fuck it kind of
Yeah,
stage at the end where it's just like, you know,
right.
that's my, that, there we go, um but McCarthy, it just felt like he just kept refining and refining and refining, and then he just wrote this, like, this thing that's like almost so incredibly minimalist, but then so big at the same time. Like that that scene at the end, like in the theater with the ghost, um, in Passenger, his friend, forgive me, what's his name?
John
Who?
John Shadden.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
yeah,
okay, yep, I know the scene you're talking about.
yeah.
Yeah,
That lingers with me. Like if I just close my eyes and think about the passenger, I just think of like five different things. Like that's one of the things I think about, like just that ghostly conversation.
yeah. And
Because
it
that's, I mean, I'm just gonna say, like, that's when I started to think about, oh, I think McCarthy is dying.
yeah,
Like I think these are written by a man who is looking back at his life.
yeah, yeah. And as a as a character with Bobby Western, just that sequence, and he does see the kid, right? He sees the flipper kid
Yeah, the
near the end.
Philomite.
Yeah.
What's it?
The word means like limbless or something like that. Thiamelody, I don't know.
Yeah.
But him also, you know, having that experience with John Shaden, his old friend, it just parallels just kind of like how similar him and Alice are at the end of the day. Like they both, they're just kind of, you know, riddled with the same skeletons. And um, Alice talking with the kid and the kid's attitude in the passenger, something I noticed right away in Stella Maris was that's her attitude. Like I didn't
Right.
get much of it in the passenger, but in Stella Maris, I was like, oh, it's like she's the kid now, and the therapist is her in the
Yeah.
passenger. Um, and I would love to just see like how they would do that in a movie. Just have the
Mhm.
sequences with a kid with flipper arms, like, and make
Right.
it not look ridiculous. I don't know.
I mean, that part, like, that's what I mean. Like, the spooky elements of that book, just these little kisses of like the hallucinations of the other carny folk,
Yeah,
you know, that are like always just beyond, like just around the corner, like just out of reach. Like, uh, it just, yeah, I don't even know how. That's what we were talking about earlier too, about like live action adaptations with some of his stuff. I don't really see how something like that would really work.
yeah,
Uh, maybe on the stage, you know, but uh, yeah, as an audiobook, it was even crazy.
yeah.
Um,
The narrator did a great job of doing the voices. The voice of the
mm,
kid was great. That
yeah,
like 1920s New York accent kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, like just like, hey, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's what I love about listening to his books, his audiobooks. Like some of the guys narrating it, like, whew.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. I mean, what can you say about his work as a whole? Because like the problem I have with McCarthy and why I'm so glad that you like him so much is like I can rarely get anyone else to read him and therefore talk about it with me because of how awful, like, I don't want to say his books are, but like there's something terrible in every single one of them. And I can't pitch it to anyone. You know, I wouldn't be like, I would have to just know you well enough to be like, read Blood Meridian. It's a very good book.
Just even saying that sounds off. Like
Yeah.
people who know Blood Meridian, like it's just, you know, it's one of those books where it's like, yeah, it's an excellent book, but like my god, you have to have the stomach for that, you know?
Yeah.
It's just his
Yeah.
most brutal for sure.
Just bleak. The scene where the judge like buys the puppies, or I don't remember if it was like the
Yeah.
judge or Glanton, but like just buys the puppies
And
and
he
then shoots them and throws them in the river.
yeah, it was like what? And that's
Yeah.
just the book is filled with that. This gang of outlaws, they're scalping Native Americans, but also they're screwing over everybody who they're selling the scalps to. They
Right.
sell the scalps to the town, they party in the town, they kill a few
Ravage
people.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, they steal what they can and then they move on. But
Yeah.
I want to research more of it, but I had read that Cormac McCarthy researched actual events in the South in that area during that time. And I think it was just like a few anecdotal type of situations, and he just kind of wove it together as, you know, he created
Yeah.
the judge and all these people to, you know, cause all
Yeah.
that.
I yeah, I feel like Blood Meridian is for anyone that's like, "Oh, do you think you actually like cowboys? You read this." You
Right.
know, it's like it's a very classic Western movie idea. Like I could see it being a cleaned up 1960s Western of just like, you know, a gang of rough and tumble mercenaries are are given the task to go south and collect scalps, and they're led by this very ominous figure who, seems to know what to do every turn, no matter how fucked up things get. So you're like, okay, that's pretty cool. I'm on board. I'll follow these guys, you know. And then just the book just turns into just like raping and pillaging, and it's almost like he's saying like, well, yeah,
It's like, what
these
did
are
you expect?
terrible. Like I told you they were awful men. Like, what do awful men do, especially in the 19th century?
yeah.
Like, it's like, yeah, no, that's true. you know? And then I just look at myself like, why am I reading this? Because I'm just like, this is really good, but it's so awful.
So
it's
awful. And usually that puts me off of any book or movie when you have no likable characters, they're all terrible fucking people, and nothing is going to be done about that. I check myself out. I'm like, dude, why am I going to finish this? I don't want to be in the head of some shithead and nothing happens to him. Like, why am I going to sit in this head for that long? But with McCarthy, it's like, yeah, there, he's the draw to it, right? You're looking through the eyes of these fucked up people, but because it's McCarthy writing it, you're like, you know what? For this once, I'll sit through it. I'll read through this. I'll, just to capture that like elegance that he has, even with his brutality.
Yeah, I mean, I think what he does is every single book he introduces you to the landscape first. Like, I think that's his opening gambit, is like, just look at this shit, and then it's almost like everything that happens from there is the B story. Like, the main story is look at the landscape and just look how things operate, and like, what changes and activates and deactivates within this, mechanism that he's showing you. And oh, by the way, here's some really grisly dialogue, and just like, here's what the folks are up to that are wandering the surface of this mechanism, and that's why you just go, oh, okay. Like, he zooms out so far enough that he's just like, nothing really matters. Like, awfulness doesn't matter, beauty doesn't matter, it doesn't matter that these two love each other, it doesn't matter that they don't get to be with each other, because that's always it too, right? Like, every fucking romance in every single one of his books that I've read ends badly.
Yeah.
Like, I know you haven't read the Border trilogy, but there's cowboys falling in love all over the place in those books. And first off, they're children, of course. It's teenagers. And, teenage prostitutes. And, it's like, it's always a questionable love where you're like, yeah, it's sweet, but what the fuck, man?
Like, come on, man. What the fuck?
It's like, but they love each other.
Yeah.
So you just go like, okay, and it again, like, he does this thing where he pulls you in just far enough. I think Blood Meridian is the most saturated you ever get in his realm, where like, you're like, okay, pull me out, and he's like, no.
Yeah, for real.
I'm like, no, it's just gonna stay here.
Yeah.
Because like, some books, like, it really is just landscape. I think Child of God is the only one that sort of perfectly peppers a little mix of both, because it's almost a novella. It's really, really short, with like page or half page chapters. And each one is just like, sometimes you're watching the main guy, sometimes you're just like watching nothing, and you're just it's just like this Tennessee landscape in the 1940s, but then every now and then you just see him dragging this dead body around because he found her, and he's been having sex with her in his fucking cave, and it's just like, okay. Cool.
Yeah, I started Child of God, and like, we started seeing some of that, and I'm like, I don't think now's the time for me to read this. I haven't returned to it, but
yeah, Hmm. It probably hits different when you have kids too. Um,
Yeah, dude, so many things that I read now. It's like it just always comes in my head, and like in a lot of different novels, oh my god, in Cormac McCarthy novels, there's a few times where they eat newborns, they eat babies. Outer
mhm.
Dark, they ate the baby. Blood, no, not Blood. The Road, they ate the baby.
Yeah,
I'm sure maybe, well, Blood Meridian was, oh, these very small children, we're going to do unspeakable things to them and then scalp them.
yeah,
And I'm very attuned to it because I'm like, I have a kid. Stop doing this.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
man.
yeah. That's something I always hear about new parents is like suddenly violence against children is like off the table with the kind of content that you can stomach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like that with a lot of stuff. I can't really do sexual violence anymore.
Yeah, that's still a no
Uh,
go for me.
yeah,
Like, if I could help it, like, if I'm reading a book and that comes up, I skip past it. I can't. Yeah.
yeah,
That's my one. Even though the kid stuff sucks, but I'll still go through it. But yeah, I'm with you on that. That's the one thing that's like a that wasn't necessary.
hmm hmm. I mean, I I appreciate when like it can be alluded to without being shown.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, that's my problem with a lot of cinema and like television. I just like you can tell me that it happened. I don't need to see it
Right.
happen. Like I can go on a whole tangent about sex scenes um, in any media where I'm just like, unless like what happens specifically in the action of sex, I'm always like, why do I why do I need to see this? Um, but some people just get entertained by sex scenes. Yeah. So with McCarthy's like nuances about that, it's like again, it's just enough where you see the judge naked in a room with an 11-year-old, and it's just like that. It's just like he's naked in the room with an 11-year-old,
Yeah. He
and then
doesn't tell you. It's just
nope,
leave it.
and then the story keeps going, and you're just like, but it's just like bomb after bomb after bomb that you have to just keep like.
You have to keep ignoring it. Like, oh, he didn't technically write it. Oh, yep. They were just hanging out. Just let's move on to the
Yeah,
next part of the
yeah.
story.
Was he mentoring her? What was he
Yeah.
doing in there?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, The Road. I remember when I read The Road because that was the first McCarthy novel I ever read,
Same here.
and that was because of the movie. Uh,
Oh, I think
because
I read it first actually.
good for you. I wish I had done that because obviously No Country for Old Men came
Hmm.
first, and I knew McCarthy's name after that, but I still never read anything. And then I watched The Road and found out that too was a McCarthy novel, and that's when I was like, well, fuck. Like these are both two very good movies with amazing dialogue. I guess I have to fucking read it. And I remember just like sitting in a dark place. I was like, it was back when I smoked cigarettes and I had to smoke cigarettes out in the garage. So it was like a cold garage with like one lamp on, just like hovered, just like, and like it's the first time ever in my book reading career that I read a passage and then had to close the book and stop. And that was the baby eating scene.
Oh,
It was
yeah. They
yeah.
find the baby on like the what you call it, where you roast like stuff over the fire. Like, ugh,
Because they had been following behind the
yeah.
family and like, you knew that there was a pregnant woman and then like
Yep.
you just see like a little bit of blood and what was left behind of a roasted baby. You're just like, so they stopped, she gave birth, they immediately cooked the baby, ate it, and then
Yeah.
kept moving.
Yeah. And then the sequence in the house with the people in the basement, like holy shit. Um,
Yeah,
because the cannibals had them locked in a cellar. They
with
go in
their
the cellar
limbs. Yeah.
and yeah, and I think they begged the man and his son to help them, but dude, imagine like bringing your kid through this, and like your kid sees these people who obviously really need help, and you're just
Yeah.
like, no, we have to take care of ourselves. That's it, buddy.
Yeah.
Like,
I always loved the added line in the movie that I don't believe was in the book when the people return and the man and the son are still hiding, and you hear the people talking to each other, and one of them says like, I can't stand that smell, and then someone's just like, I don't smell anything, and then one of them's like, you don't smell it anymore. And uh,
that's an
just like
incredible line. I didn't remember that, but I think that would have fit for Cormac McCarthy to have it in the book.
yeah, I mean, I'm almost like second guessing myself, but I did just
Yeah.
recently reread The Road, and I don't think that line is in there. Just like, oh, you don't smell it anymore.
Yeah, I think the dialogue is only through the. If anybody else talks, it's because they're around the man and the son. They're like
Mhm.
talking to them. So I
Mhm.
don't think that it would be in the book. I haven't read the book in a long time though, so, and I don't even
Yeah,
remember it from the movie. But um, yeah, I think that's an awesome line, because what it in those simple lines there, it just shows so much about one, the mindset of the people who are just numb to the atrocities that they're doing in this post-apocalyptic landscape, and two, it's just like, I don't know, just the, yeah, whatever, I don't
yeah,
smell it, like, it's just
yeah.
so bleak.
Hmm. Yeah. It's always that tone of like just kind of a shrug, like I know that what I'm showing you is horror, and also, mm, you know,
That's life.
because yeah, like there's other writers who can, use violence and gore and awfulness. Um, like one of the first guys I ever got obsessed with, well before I got into McCarthy, was Chuck Palahniuk. Um, and Palahniuk had a similar device with awfulness, but it was a little bit more like kind of in your face, like a little punk rock kind of like, I know that this is going to upset you, and therefore here it is, sort of just like exhibitioning horror for just, I don't want to say for the sake of it, but I mean, did you ever read Guts, the short story that everyone has to read at some point?
Guts, is that by Palahniuk?
Yeah, it's a short story, a part of a collection in a book called Haunted.
mm, i
Um,
I haven't read it.
I'm not going to make you, but there's a time in my life, and I feel like in a lot of other people's lives, where it was just like a stylish thing to like pass it along, which is like how I got into Chuck Palahniuk, because someone passed it along to my buddy, who then passed it along to me. That was like, you got to read this short story. And when Chuck Palahniuk used to read this short story live, people fainted. It
Wow.
happened every time. Um, it's really graphic. Uh, it's very unique in what happens, but it has to do with the pee-pee hole
Ugh. Oh
and
no.
just insertions, bodily insertions, and holes and things um,
Nice,
that
nice.
didn't happen. Yeah, it's you know, emphasis on the word guts. It's hard, and when I first read that, um, the feeling and the awfulness, it was like the first time I realized like words could just do that. It was just words on a page, you know. And I think that's when I got kind of obsessed with writers who can have that kind of effect. Like it's what I always wanted out of Stephen King and occasionally get out of Stephen King. And I
Yeah,
know you and I can like have an entire other episode about like the nuances to King and like how little bits can save the whole book, even though major chunks of it are just like what the fuck the whole time.
yeah.
Um, I love writers that can write filth. Like I like a good grungy, filthy novel. Uh, if it gets permission, a lot of times there isn't permission and it's just bad.
Yeah.
Uh, but somehow I don't understand how McCarthy made it through his entire career with his use of the N word.
I don't
And like
know.
I've never heard his name brought up as like a boo McCarthy, like not fucking cool, dude.
Because Tarantino surprisingly doesn't get as much as he should for it. He gets
Right.
flack about it now, which it's easier when you're making movies because you have more visibility. But I kind of put them together in that regard because it's like they both, get carried away with using that word, and it's like you're right. McCarthy never really has gotten flack for it his whole career. Every time if someone were to imply that he was racist, they like to say that his first and only television interview was with Oprah. So it's like, it's like, I don't think he was racist. I just, he was someone who
Oprah, he's not racist.
yeah, exactly. But no, it's one of those things where it's like they're unapologetically trying to reflect the horrors of reality, right? And in my opinion, you could do that without all that stuff. And honestly, I didn't read Blood Meridian right away because of that, because I think the first few pages it just drops that on you. And I put the book down and I'm like, what the hell? Like, dude,
Yeah.
dude, come on, man. Like,
Yeah.
he's not as what do you call it? He's not as like free with the word as say like Quentin Tarantino, but there are times, I think you said in the Orchard Keeper, it comes up and it's just like, dude.
Yeah. I mean, and in this whole conversation about like he'll show you the beauty and the awfulness, like one could argue like some of the awfulness he's trying to show you is this kind of flippant racism. But I would argue against that and be like, it's so been done already.
Yeah.
Because I remember like reading that and then flipping over the book and like, when did he write this? Like in the 70s? Like, oh, like, come on, man. Like, yeah, it's the only unfortunate thing about him because like, I'm not gonna tell a black person they should go read McCarthy if I find out they haven't read McCarthy.
Yeah.
It's just like that, or it's like he's not a universally readable guy. Like you and I are two white guys talking about him because we're kind of who he wrote for.
Right.
He definitely didn't write for women either.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it was until his very, very, very last novel, Stella, that he actually passed the test of having a female character.
Yeah. His literal last novel, he did it. Female protagonist.
Right. Who isn't just there as some whore, quote unquote. Which is how most of his female characters were.
Yeah. And like, so one of the things that I liked about Blood Meridian was that one of the most prominent outlaws was a black man. Black Jackson is what they called him, and him killing off White Jackson after being, scolded and said these nasty things to him, he just lops his head off. Which, let me just say, the writing of that kill is incredible. It says like two dark ropes of blood, and it like how it sizzles onto the fire. I was just like, like, just that was excellent. But to the point, I think that McCarthy I think it was mostly like, even if it was written in the 70s for some of his novels, just right off the back of like the decade of like civil rights and stuff, it's like that's he probably observed and noticed like, hey, like people are fucking shitty. Look how they're treating these people because of who they are. Oh, I'm making
Yeah,
books about literally everybody's terrible, but he says it so much in some of his novels, and it's like, we get it.
yeah.
We get it. It's
I
like
mean,
sexual
like,
violence. It's like, dude, just refer to it. You don't have to. You don't have to go there, man.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like, how many different times, like, there's at least two different books of his I've read where like someone is just referred to as the N word, and it's by the narrator.
Yeah,
You
who
know what
is
I mean?
essentially supposed to be McCarthy, right? If you're the
Right,
narrator, it's the author's perspective, but
right. You know, like at least with Mark Twain, it was from the perspective of an ignorant child.
yeah,
But when it's like the third person omniscient narrator being like the black, it's just like, okay, don't call him the black. Like,
yeah.
don't,
It's
you
like,
know.
stop, just stop, just
But I mean, again,
write
like
someone else.
that's the whole criticism. Like he and like many other white writers, like there was no consideration of like what would a black person think reading this novel.
Yeah,
Where like black people are literally just scenery in the background throughout
yeah.
most.
That's why a lot of that's why the older novels I read are usually only science fiction, because science fiction, it's about like the science, it's about the sci-fi. They don't really give a fuck about their characters back then, right? But everything
Yeah,
that has a character, it's just the typical, like, you got the main straight white male, and the girl is either in distress or she's like an idiot or a ditz, and it's like, that plays out in almost everything you'll read from back then that focuses on characters. um and McCarthy was just another one who fell into that trend of like, he didn't brought in anything about his characters that he chose. The biggest thing was always just that they're shitty people. I guess that's a good thing, right?
yeah,
He's not picking people of different race or gender, which means that he's also inherently not making them terrible people in his books all the time.
right.
at
Yeah,
least at least
that's
it's always the white male who's the bad guy. I could agree with
yeah,
that.
that is true. That is true. It's definitely just the awful behavior of white men.
Yeah,
Um,
but now that
yeah,
you see more black authors out there on the market, and you see so many more, you see a lot more diversity just in literature that you didn't have visibility to back then. um
yeah,
you would like to be able to refer to older stuff, and have some other people of different backgrounds to read and not feel really fucking uncomfortable. Because if I feel uncomfortable, imagine how someone who's black reading the book, how they're gonna feel. Like, they're gonna put it down and be like, what the fuck am I gonna read this? Like, it's his
yeah,
biggest flaw, I would say,
yeah,
as a writer.
yeah. Just being an old white man.
Yeah. That's the biggest crime there.
I mean, that's always a thing where I'm like, hey, he's an old white man. Um, sorry, like you should read this book, but it is by an old white man who is very old white man-y
Yeah,
in his language. But
The Passenger was pretty progressive.
yeah,
Debbie.
no, Debbie was fantastic. I think because there was a moment where I was just like kind of grossed out before he revealed that she was trans. It was just like because he was like showing us her tits,
Yeah, and then
like she
and that
was
felt
just
weird, like
yeah, like
describing
she's
it.
just falling out of her dress and like yeah, like we're watching her through Bobby's eyes, and I just remember being like, "Ew, McCarthy, like you old gross guy." And then she starts talking and like goes through her whole thing about like how her sister will like use her pronouns and all this, and I was just
Yep.
like, McCarthy's in here talking about pronouns?
Yeah, I was like, cool, like, you know, he gets it, you know? He shows us that
Yeah.
he gets it at the end of his fucking life and career. I thought, and the character was great because the character played such a good emotional role with Bobby too, because he gives her the letter at the end of the novel, and
Right.
like their friendship I thought was excellent, and I was really happy that Debbie was such an important character to play too.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. Again, like, I'm disappointed that he died. I know that seems heartless to say, but just like, I did remember thinking, like, what if we get some woke era McCarthy novels?
Yeah,
But
yeah, that's the closest thing we'll get. A female protagonist and a positively portrayed trans character, which
yeah,
I read that Sutri has what nowadays would be considered trans in it. I think Sutri was one.
yeah, maybe.
I don't know. It was a Reddit post, so and I haven't read the
Yeah.
book, so I don't really know. But
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There's a few characters. I don't remember if there's any. I mean, there's inappropriate relationship with a minor character at one point.
oh no,
But
of course he throws it in there. Of course.
oh yeah. Oh, and there's a kid that fucks a watermelon.
Wow.
It's actually it's a really well written sequence of just this kid that like comes out in the middle of the night and like fucks this dude's watermelon patch. Like, he just like takes a different watermelon because it's like hot in the middle of summer.
Oh.
So there's like these hot watermelons, and he's just like drilling a hole and just fucking them.
But see, I would rather, like, I give it pass to McCarthy for stuff like that over Stephen King for it.
Yeah, right.
That sequence. We don't have to go into it right now, but like McCarthy gets a pass, Stephen King does not.
Right. Yeah. You know, cocaine is not a good enough excuse, Stephen King.
Yeah, for real.
Or your severe alcoholism.
Yeah.
Because that shit is still at your heart. And like, knowing that McCarthy, I feel like McCarthy was probably woke the whole time, and
Yeah.
despite that, like, wrote about what he wrote about. You know, like, that's the thing that's so perplexing about him. Like, I think he was intentionally muddying up his work. That's what it always felt like. I mean, you know, this is coming from like no scholarly research on McCarthy. I've never read an interview. I've just read his books, so I have no idea what his actual perspective was. But it just always feels like he knew how nasty he was being.
Yeah. I want to talk about this real quick. So, and yes, I didn't read the book of No Country for Old Men, but you look at the judge in Blood Meridian, that's like an excellent wild card villain. Just like formidable in every sense. The dude speaks a whole bunch of languages, is huge, and you can't do anything to beat him or kill him. But I feel like McCarthy perfected the formula for wild card villain with Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. And I honestly, I'm going to read the fucking book because I want to see how that looks in the book, because that character, that is like, you could get that excellent, horrifying wild card villain without them potentially fucking kids and all that other shit. Like, it's just like, this is the guy I want. I want Anton. I don't want the judge. And I think Anton would beat the judge if they ever got into it, because, you know, Anton would know not to get close to the judge for any of that, like, bear strength, right?
Yeah, I love that this is just turning into a who would win in a fight.
Yeah, for real.
But I mean, I don't know. Yeah, because like, it's kind of the, you know, unstoppable force, immovable object. Because the judge is basically, from my understanding, like, he is the universe.
Yeah.
Like, he never dies, he never gets old.
He's indifferent to everything.
Indifferent to everything, but also is only nasty.
Yeah.
But I mean, I see. Then as soon as I say only, I'm like, he dances around jovially and like play the fiddle and like is pretty much pleased at all times, if not indifferent.
Yeah.
You know.
That's a good point.
But then he's just such a conundrum because like then I want to be like, but then he surrounds himself with horror, but also he sees to it that every single member of that posse that he put together dies.
Does
Like,
doesn't the priest make it out alive? I think he's the only one who survives besides the judge.
I guess the priest is. Yeah.
Everybody else ends up dying.
Everyone else ends up dying, even if it doesn't seem like it was at the hands of the judge. They still.
Yeah.
Because don't we see Toadvine getting hung at the end? And
Yep.
like,
Because the judge set him up. He framed
Right.
Toadvine and just like snitched on him or whatever.
right.
And the priest knew this from the beginning, but the priest is an idiot because he's like telling the kid like, "Oh, don't get involved with the judge. He's a terrible human being." It's like, priest, what are you
Right.
still doing there, dude? Like, you're just
Right.
as bad as them. Like,
Yeah.
but he warned from the beginning. He told the readers too, like, this guy is not to be trusted or anything.
Right. I mean, when we first see the judge, you know, when he like shows up and he was just like calls out that one preacher and says like he's had sex with goats, and they're just like, what the hell? And they like take him and like go off and tar and feather him, and then
And
he's
there's
just,
like a big fight too, I think, right?
Yeah, and like the whole tent comes down and like everyone peels out, and then like they're in like the bar later and they're like, how'd you know that about that guy? He's like, know what?
It's like, I've never
He's
met
like,
him before in my life. Like,
It's like, I've never seen that man. I don't know who he was. And everyone just be like, what?
yeah.
Which, like, I even remember reading that and being like, why did he do that? Like, there wasn't a payoff.
Yeah.
It's just like, it almost seems like that was the conclusion of another story, you know, between the judge and that man.
Yeah.
Or something. Well, he even said he's never met him before, so it's like,
Yeah.
it's just, he was setting off something. Or it was him getting into the kid's life, you know? Like, I don't know.
And it was such a good introduction because like that's how the judge just treated everything. Like he just does it just because he fucking wants to. He enjoys, like you said, he gets pleasure out of just all of that absurdity. You know,
Yeah.
just no rhyme or reason for it. Another reason I favor Anton is because he actually has a moral code. Like,
Yeah.
he gives people an opportunity, and you know, he kills Llewellyn's wife because he said, if you don't give me the money, I'm going to kill your wife, and Llewellyn didn't give him the money. So it's like, and even when he flipped the coin too when he went in there, so he
Yeah,
actually
right.
he gave a lot of chances to not do it, and it's like, well,
Yeah. I mean, but Anton Chigurh is also just kind of crazy.
sociopath, 100%.
You know, like everything about him is just kind of like this narcissistic, like he doesn't have to do any of that.
Yeah. When he's at the gas station and he's talking to the store clerk and he flips the coin on him, like he probably would have honestly fucking killed him. Like,
Yeah. My favorite line of that, it's like, don't mix it in with your other coins, because then it'll just become a regular coin,
yeah.
which it is. Like, which it is. Like, what are you even saying?
Yeah.
Just like, this is a lucky coin. It's also nothing.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So those, I don't think he has any villains like those two in anything else.
There was there was in what was that movie called? Was it the Counselor?
Yeah. Oh, I never watched that. I heard
Really?
I heard it wasn't good, but from a McCarthy perspective, was it?
Yeah, I mean, like, it felt very McCarthy. I think it was like trying to be kind of cool,
Oh,
and it like didn't need to be. But the looming threat in that is the cartel, and it's just like this counselor who, he's just like a rich white lawyer. He's like thinking about getting into some cartel business, and it's like Brad Pitt is like the liaison, and he's like telling them like all this shit that they do and like what they're gonna do if they get double crossed or whatever the fuck, which of course you then see play out and it ends
right.
terribly. But the thing I think the most about from that movie is uh um the actor who plays Anton Chigurh,
Javier
uh
Bardem.
Javier Bardem, is in that movie, and he's fucking um God, I can't think of anyone's fucking names right now, but it doesn't matter. uh Cameron Diaz. And Cameron Diaz is this like floozy kind of wild girl character, and he's telling this story about how she got on top of his car when he was inside the car and like put herself naked on the windshield and like pushed her genitals up against it, and he was like, it was very gynecological. And I don't know why, I just think about that, like he's just in the McCarthy language. He's describing how she put her pussy on the windshield and he didn't like the way it looked.
Yeah, that sounds very
like,
McCarthy.
It's very McCarthy, but the movie itself doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you watch The Sunset Limited?
Is that with the Samuel Jackson?
Yep, and Tommy Lee Jones, who also directed it.
I did not see it. I remember finding out about it and like reading about it and watching a trailer of it and telling myself I should watch this, and that was probably like 4 years ago.
Yeah. So Tommy Lee Jones plays this guy who is ready to jump in front of a train, the Sunset Limited, but he stops at the last second, and Samuel L. Jackson kind of takes him to his apartment to like, let him relax and kind of talk to him about what's going on. And the whole movie is just like, it's like you got Tommy Lee Jones, who's the depressed atheist, and you have Samuel L. Jackson, who's like this more optimistic theologist, right? He believes in God, and he has anecdotes about that, while Tommy Lee Jones has a counter to all those anecdotes. It's really good. Really good. And like I've said before with Stella Maris, like I love that just takes place in one area and it's just dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
If you're able to hit that, you got something magical in your writing ability.
That's like HBO. Is that like an HBO?
Yeah, it was an HBO movie.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check it out, see if it's still on Max.
Oh shit, that's a good point. It probably is.
Probably, right?
Yeah.
Although they're doing that thing where they don't host anything anymore.
Right.
Like they got rid of Westworld. Like
really?
Yeah, it
that
doesn't
was
exist
a recent show.
It doesn't exist anymore. It's not on HBO.
Wow.
Yeah, doesn't that
that's
suck?
weird. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it just nope. If you don't own it, yeah.
You are listening to Narrow Minded, where we discuss perspectives and ideas as we navigate the mysteries of the cosmos.